My name is Miles Harrison. I'm the President and Chief Executive Officer of Conexeu.
I'm Brian Pilcher. I am the Chief Medical Officer for Conexeu.
So wound care represents our initial regulatory pathway because of a significant clinical need, first of all, and directly leverages the same regenerative biology that underpins the broader platform that Brian was talking about with aesthetics. However, for context, it's a fast path, right? It's a 510(k) pathway for the US Food and Drug Administration. The process really for a medical device class 2. It also allows a company to demonstrate that product is substantially equivalent to an existing legally marketed device. We already have our predicate. We've seen the performance with that, and that's something that we have been demonstrating in some of our preclinical work. And we believe this provides an efficient and disciplined pathway for our lead indication. Now, the goal is to submit that 510(k) for wound care by the end of this year, beginning next year in Q1 2027. And if cleared, I can't say when because this is science, but if cleared, and we believe that's a high probability, that would establish a platform in a commercial healthcare setting. So that gives us the operational, it gives us the manufacturing, that gives the regulatory experience that can support the future indication development. So the biology is highly relevant to dermatologists because it's the same extracellular matrix that is lost during aging and GLP-1 related volume loss, and is also disrupted during injury and wound healing. So for the first gate, coming to wound care, it's a $2.6 billion opportunity. But of course, aesthetics that we were talking about earlier, that's an $11 billion opportunity. And who knows what that number will look like in 4 years' time with the GLP-1s and the 171 new products coming into that platform. This is going to be entirely a different perspective moving forward. It's
also important that, when we think about each of these verticals or each of these indications, we have to have discussions with the FDA around how they're going to classify us, right? We've already had that discussion with the agency around wound care. Once we have our wound care package submitted and we have our initial clearance, then we're going to sit down with them, discuss, how tissue regeneration relates to the dermal filler category, and then that'll obviously inform our subsequent clinical development path. Our evidence package is going to be required in our development strategy for the aesthetic space. As Miles mentioned, at least from a wound care standpoint, this would be, I'd say, relevant to the Mohs surgeons, right, that are watching this. The wound care indication is going to be pivotal for us. But the most important thing I'll point out, at least today, our device remains investigational. We're still preclinical, and we're developing that evidence package responsibly to submit to the agency around wound care. I think that as Miles mentioned, the $11 billion opportunity that's projected to grow significantly to $24 billion and probably beyond with all of these new patients that we're seeing. We get very, very excited about the aesthetic space, both in the US, which is where we'll get our indications initially, and then expanding beyond that. But at the same time, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of these foundational technologies that are being used to try and address the questions of this large volume issue with GLP-1 patients, they're introduced 20 years ago, and they really haven't undergone a lot of innovation. Everything that we have seen with the extraordinary growth, especially in the hyaluronic acid category, are new entrants, slight differences in formulation, increases or differentiation among the indications, right? But there really hasn't been a foundational, innovative technology that's shaken up the space, and that's where we at Conexeu get very, very excited.
We're not building a single product. I think that's the key here. We're building a regenerative tissue platform. We were founded really on one simple question: what if we could regenerate tissue loss through aging, injury, weight loss, disease, surgery, simply, rather than just replacing it? And that vision's really evolved into the platform. And we also look and consider breast reconstruction within that platform. So today it's wound care, aesthetics, we've got oral health, so dentistry into the gingiva, veterinary medicine, specialty tissue engineering, and breast reconstruction. And these markets are around $20 billion in potential opportunity. I liken the product really to just the analogy is not the same mode of action, clearly, but Botox was for strabismus when it was launched, and now is a $9 billion category but across both cosmetic and medical dermatology. And so, it's really expanded. And I see a similar sort of opportunity here for our CXU, our tissue regeneration product. Now, if we think about breast reconstruction, we've just recently messaged, and the press release is available on our website, our example of breast, which is bioregenerative, ergonomically architected smart tissue, which stands for breast. So that's a trademark that we have. And this breast reconstruction market is around $5 billion globally. And today, most of the procedures are implants, tissue expanders, other reconstructive materials. So our long-term vision is to explore whether regenerative technologies can help patients regenerate their own tissue rather than just rely on a permanent implant. So whilst we're still in development, I think the platform demonstrates this versatility that we were talking about with the underlying technology, and certainly reinforces our commitment to creating some solutions, for multiple areas of regenerative medicine. So a resorbable breast, that would be something. No complications, very limited interface with a patient over a period of time, which we see today with contracture and changes that people get with a silicone implant. And the platform, really, with more than a decade of development and a number of publications, we believe that we have this deep experience across a number of different areas, and I think that highlights the versatility of one.
And to go back to the study that we just completed, I'm a scientist, and so I get excited by new data. One of the findings that we gained from that study was that this material seems to be tissue agnostic. And what I mean by that is it will support the ingrowth of the tissue in the proper compartment that you place it in. And that's something that's unlike anything that this industry has seen. And that's why I got initially very, very excited. So that's why Miles discusses that we believe we have a platform technology that can go into multiple verticals anywhere that you need to restore the matrix of a soft tissue. I don't even think we've contemplated every potential use. We're obviously a young company. We have to be very careful about our spend and where we spend our resources. And so that's why we're focusing initially on the wound care to get us into that market quickly and develop revenue, while really thinking about being a real true innovator in the medical aesthetic space. But again, Miles has mentioned breast reconstruction, tissue restoration in the gingiva, veterinary care is something that we're looking at, as well as a number of other potential verticals. So to be able to work with a technology that seems to have a lot of unique opportunities with science that backs it up is what gets me excited and gets me to work every day. And so we hope to become leaders in the bioregeneration category, and that's the vision ultimately behind Conexeu.
And I think for those dermatologists listening, the GLP-1 patients are not simply seeking volume correction. They'll be seeking tissue restoration. I think this is the future. They're certainly looking for longevity. They're looking for regenerative. And I think this is truly a product that will fit that need and fits so perfectly into a practice environment in terms of injector ability, the format of the product, the simpleness of execution at the bedside. So that's I think remarkable. On the regenerative medicine side, I think we are really indicating that we are a full scaffold. We're not part of a scaffold. We're not just about filling space. It's about restoring this biological framework that enables the tissue regeneration. And if anybody was to remember anything from this discussion, is that we have one platform, multiple markets, and we're on a mission to architect bioregeneration.